The Motor Dream podcast is recorded on Wallamedigal land of the Eora Nation. It always was and always will be the lands of the First Nations of Australia.
This is the Motor Dream podcast.
Hello and welcome again to the Motor Dream podcast. I'm Conor McNally and this is the 11th episode of a show where we can dream just a little about what our dream garage would be if money was no issue whatsoever. Now, I've been fortunate so far across the first 10 episodes to have spoken to many different people across many facets of motor racing. That being said, we shouldn't ignore one of the backbones of our sport that keeps it alive, and that's grassroots motor racing. So, on this episode, this is what we're going to be focusing on, and it's an episode I've been keen to put out into the podcast stratosphere for quite a while. So, keep listening. If you're a new listener to this podcast, here's how it works. I tell my guests that one day they wake up and check their phones and discover that they receive a text to say that they need to check their bank balance. They then open up their bank apps and suddenly discover that their balance has gone to infinity. They are billionaires. As soon as they discover their newfound fortune, they get an email from this mystery benefactor that tells them that they can spend anything that they like and buy any car or bike or machine that they want. However, there is a catch. They are only allowed 3 cars, bikes or machines in their dream garage. It sounds easy in theory, but as my previous guests have discovered, it's been very, very hard to decide what those 3 machines would be. You'll get to hear from drivers and riders from within the motorsport game, as well as those who work in the motoring industry, and on the odd occasion you'll hear from some prominent personalities who all share the same passion for cars and bikes as well as motoring. Okay, I want to ask you a question. Put your hand up metaphorically if you've always wanted to build your own race car or bike and do a track day, or go that extra level and take racing to a serious level. Almost everybody. Okay, well, chances are you are one of the many people who have always said, I'm going to buy myself a car or bike and go racing. And I must confess, I'm one of those people who said it. And then you balk at when you discover the enormous cost of building a race car or bike. Well, my guest on this episode has not only talked the talk, he's actually done it. He went and bought himself a Hyundai Excel on a whim back in 2017 and built himself up a proper race car with the intention to go motor racing on a budget in the highly competitive Hyundai Series X3 XL one-make category. Trouble is, he found the video resources on how to go about building a race car almost impossible to find online. So, he decided to document his race car build with the hopes that he can educate prospective racers the do's and don'ts of building a race car. And so, the Nugget Project was born. The Nugget Project was created in 2017 by Matthew Hull, a photographer and videographer whose work has featured quite prominently in Street Machine magazine within his portfolio of work. Since building his Excel to compete in the highly popular one-make category administered under the auspices of the Circuit Excel Racing Association, or SERA, his channel has taken on a life of its own, documenting the highs and lows of going motor racing and doing it with the help of family and friends, all for the love of the sport. Hull grew up in a family that has been actively involved for many years. His father raced sidecars in the UK before becoming one of the original mechanics who worked for the Honda Racing Corporation in its formative years in Grand Prix motorcycle racing, which we know nowadays as MotoGP. He also witnessed the emerging talents of a young rider from Wollongong who would go on to win the 1987 500cc World Motorcycle Championship. That young rider was Wayne Gardner. Moving to Australia in the late 1980s, Hull would fall in love as a teenager with Japanese cars and the JDM culture that came with it. He also found a passion for photography and learnt his trade working in snowboarding, where his work was being picked up by a number of publications. It wasn't before long he turned to cars, where his work remains in high demand. Nowadays, Hull is living out his childhood dream of going racing and applying his trade, shooting some cool stuff for some of the biggest publications in Australia, and he's having an absolute blast doing it. So when I messaged him if he'd be interested in joining me for a chat, he had absolutely no hesitation in doing so. This interview was recorded a few months after he contested the Circuit Excel support races at the Bathurst 6 Hour, and he was still buzzing from the experience of racing at Mount Panorama. So without further ado, enjoy my chat with the Nugget Man himself, Matthew Hull. Matthew Hull, welcome to the Motor Dream podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you, mate. I'm feel on to be on it, to be honest.
And the reason why I got you on is because I love the Nugget Project. It has been a labour of love for you for what has been about 5 years or so, and it's been an incredible ride for you to go out, buy a little Hyundai Excel off the road and turn it into your dream race car and just have the absolute time doing it. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, it certainly has. It was a silly idea. I get a bee in my bonnet. And a lot of people into cars will understand this. You get a bit of an idea one day and you're just like, maybe that'll happen. And then you start obsessing over it.
Yes.
And you think about it at night. You think about it in the shower. And you think about it when you're driving to work. All of a sudden, it has to happen or you're going to go insane. And this just kind of was one of those things.
Where did that inspiration come from? Because anyone that's watched your videos on YouTube, and if anyone wants to check it out, go and check out the Nugget Project on YouTube. It is a great channel, and I've been following it since day one. But tell us how it all began. Where did the inspiration of the Nug come from?
I don't even know, to be honest. I think I was into sim racing. I mean, I've always kind of liked cars, and I was into sim racing a bit and got into that. Just not serious, not like full on iRacing. Just on the Xbox, but I had a steering wheel and everything, and I set it up like a wooden frame, and I kind of enjoyed that. I'm like, geez, racing's a bit of fun, and obviously being racing on the Xbox, you think you're a hero and you think you're better than everybody else. I tell you what, category racing puts you down a peg really quickly. And I just started, like when you're sitting on the couch, I started Googling and thinking, how expensive is racing? Is this something I could actually do? I dabbled in go-karting for a little bit, and that was good fun. But I know it sounds silly, but a full-size race car is something a bit different. It's taking something on the road that you wish you could drive flat out and you can't, and then actually doing it, like taking a full-size car on the track. And I think I actually stumbled across... it was a blog post about one of the Excels and one of the Excel races. And I started looking. There wasn't much online. There was a bit of information. And then I went along and I think I went to Sandown and just quickly checked out one of the races and went, oh, this is cool. This can't be that expensive to build a car. I was very wrong there, but anyway.
We all go into that thinking that, this is easy. Nah. It's a lot of money gets poured into it, and puts lots of financial strain and emotional strain on not just the marriage, but on your own mental well-being. And I mean that in the nicest possible way.
Yeah, no, I'm crazy. It's okay. No, I agree, and it was. But the initial cost, when people said, like it's pretty cheap to get into, and then kind of not wrong there-ish. And I thought, well, let's give it a go. And I planted the seed in my wife's head. This is kind of how it starts. You plant the seed and go, I'm thinking about doing this, and then you just shut up for a week, and then you kind of plant the seed again. I was talking about that, and you just keep whittling away until when it actually happens, and I go, hey, I found a car. She's like, oh, okay, big sigh, and away we go. Yes. Which is kind of how I get away with most things in life. And luckily, I have a very tolerant and beautiful wife, and thank God, because
Don't worry, I have the same with my fiance, so I totally understand.
We're lucky.
Yes.
We're very lucky.
Yes. Good thing is my fiance's a Ford fan as well. So we're both Ford people. We both own Ford. Mine's now in a garage getting ready to be made into a race car. But so he's very tolerant about what's going on.
Perfect.
Totally
she understands a little bit.
She totally understands. Anyway, continue.
That's great. Well, that's pretty much it. And then I found this car in Geelong, and it was a little white XL. The guy listed it, said it was his mum's car. His mum's now too old to drive, and he had it sitting in the backyard, hadn't been driven for a few years. He said, it's got possibly a clutch throwout bearing that's maybe a bit rattly. I'm like, okay, it's easy to do. So I went down there and test drove it and made a hell of a racket. I'm like, this is something I can work with. So I gave him $600, and then he told me as I was loading on the trailer, he goes, I'm glad you bought it because I was just going to throw it away next week. I'm like, thank you. So anyway, I still gave him the $600 and then took it to my dad's about 40 minutes up the road. And I didn't actually tell him I was storing it there. I did hint to him that I was thinking about doing this. And then all of a sudden I shoved the car behind his shed and told him, begged for forgiveness. rather than asking for permission, sort of thing. So,
But the good thing is, and I want to sidetrack just a little bit here.
yeah.
It's fortunate for you. Your dad has been
Mhm.
involved in motorsport for a very long time. In fact, he even got involved in two wheels and was very much an instrumental part in Honda's MotoGP campaign way back in the 1980s before it
Mm.
became MotoGP. Elaborate a little about that because it's a really cool story.
Yeah. So Dad's a bit of a legend, really. I mean, he grew up as always into bikes and cars, and he was an apprentice mechanic. And then obviously back then, cars were expensive, so bikes were a cheaper option. He got into bikes. He was rebuilding his own bikes in his mum's kitchen, like seriously on the kitchen bench. And his mum tolerated him doing that for some reason because they didn't have a garage.
Exactly.
And then he sort of, just elaborated. He bought more bikes, and then he got into sidecar racing. So he actually built sidecar outfits to go racing in Europe, and he was good. Like he won multiple European championships on the sidecar as the driver. And he built all the sidecar units himself. They bought a bus and they converted it into a transporter where two sidecars fit underneath, one fit in the back on top of the beds, this sort of thing. It was really cool. And then I came along and Mum sort of went, I don't want you to die, because back then it was very dangerous to go sidecar racing. Dad told me a story once where they used a lot of engine braking because the drum brakes weren't that great. And at the end of the straight, he went to brake and the chain snapped.
Ooh.
Brakes didn't do much, and he shot off. And the kiddie litter was about 3 meters long, so he went straight through the kiddie litter, through the hedge, across the freeway, and into the cornfield on the other side of the freeway.
Oh.
So
Which track was that?
I can't remember. I mean, they raced at Silverstone, Brands Hatch, like all the big ones, and then a few in Europe. So I'm not too sure which track that was, but he recalled the story to me, and Mum was going, okay, this is getting a bit silly. I want my son to have a father. And so he dialed that back, and he was working for Honda at the time, and Honda said they wanted to start their, sort of Grand Prix campaign in the UK. So he put up his hand and said, I'd like to be a part of that, and basically helped build the bike. So he was building the NR500. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's
I am,
quite a famous bike. It had the oval piston setup, which was way out there. I mean, it was never that successful, but still very cool, weird Japanese technology. I actually have one of those pistons in the garage, so it's a cool thing to hang on to.
You got to hold on to that. That's really cool.
Yes, and the titanium conrod to go with it, so that's very cool. But yeah, so he was part of basically Honda UK and their Grand Prix thing, so it was good. And then they went off from there. They did that for many years before he sort of left that and started working on the car side of things and doing service department stuff for Honda UK. So it was,
And I guess it was around basically at the ripe time. And I mean ripe time, not just at the right time of being, at the beginning of that illustrious era, but being in the ripe time of seeing someone like Wayne Gardner come into the fore, because he joined Honda in the mid-'80s, and we all know what happened there. But he was like a young kid from Wollongong who came up through the ranks of production bike racing in Australia, and then tried to make his mark in Europe and racing in the World Championship, and Honda picked him up, and as I said, look where he went.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very cool. And I mean, Dad's always got really cool stories about this, and he's one of those people I can't listen to. Like, now and again, he still comes up with a story. I'm like, how have I not heard this before? Something completely out there. And we'll be watching TV. There'll be some motorsport legend. He goes, oh yeah, I used to drink beers with him, or like I was lending him spanners, or I fixed his bike. It's cool. So yeah, I guess the motorsport thing kind of runs in my veins a little bit. Can't help it.
And it obviously helped that your dad had that interest to help out. When it came to building the Nug, and it was a very long process for you, but you served a double purpose, which I really loved, because not many people have done videos or video tutorials on how to build a race car. And you actually mentioned it in one of your videos early on. The reason why you did it is to show people how it can be done.
Yeah, yep, 100%. Well, not many people, like, if you sort of, well, it's changing a bit now, but even just 5 years ago, if you went onto YouTube and you typed in, race car build, it was basically a lot of people buying a street car, strip the interior out, put some decent wheels in it, and maybe bolting a roll cage and going racing. And it was like a 2-3 video thing. And you're like, okay. But none of them are building a car to a category, and that's very different. A lot of people say, oh, I built a race car. You're like, okay, what category? They're like, oh, no. And what they mean is they've made a car light and put some sticky tires on it and taking it to a racetrack, which is great fun. Don't get me wrong, but building a car to a category is a whole different ballgame.
Mm.
There is so much, there's so many restrictions and so many things, and working within those rules to make a car fast is very difficult. You know, if you don't have these rules and regulations, you can make a car fast easily. You just keep throwing money at it, basically.
Yes.
And I've got mates who do that, and as I said, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I've got one of my mates, Ben. He's a lovely guy. He's got an S14 Silvia with an LS3 in it, I believe.
Yep.
Wickedly fast car, and yeah, he's going around Winton within half a second of Porsche GT3s, and just throwing money at this thing, and it's brilliant. But he can do that. You know, he just goes, right, I need more pace. I need to cut more time. And he just goes, right, I'm going to go do this. And he's just put a dry sump for it. And this thing's going to be a weapon. But trying to build it within a category and trying to get speed out of it is really hard because everybody's working within the same rules. And everybody thinks they've got the edge, but they don't. Well, some of them do, but you know what I mean? Like it's very hard to find those tenths within those regulations. So that's why I kind of want to do the video on it, showing how to build a car within these certain rules. And, you know, everybody, now and again, I'll still get a new person come on the channel and it's great. But they're like, oh, you should do this and this. And I have to go, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. And this is why. So yeah, for the people that do understand it, it's cool to kind of see why we build things the way we do. And hopefully I've kind of documented that the best I can anyway.
You've done a really good job of it because you get a lot of people supporting you, and most of them have been long-term viewers. They've been following you from the get-go, and they've supported you recently in your quest to race at Mount Panorama. You went there as part of the Bathurst 6 Hour, and that was an unbelievable experience for you, and you said so because you put a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of stress went through that because you had to rebuild an engine because one of the pistons, the bolt at the bottom ends were, I think they were fractured or something.
It was the crank cap. Yeah.
That's right, the crank cap. And you had to get that replaced. But then at the same time, you found out the engine that you had in the car wasn't properly sealed. Now, under the rules of Circuit Excel Racing Association, which is the governing body for Circuit Excels in this country, under the Motorsport Australia banner, you had to basically do the whole thing again because the way that sealing was done wasn't done properly. So it gave you added stress on top of getting everything ready for Bathurst, trying to get some support financially from all the people that have been watching your channels. It was like a soap opera saga, really. And I mean that in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
But it was.
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. Yeah, like it's that was a weird one because I got the thumbs up to go to Bathurst. And as you said, like when I started this channel, I think my main goal was to go and drive at Bathurst. And I would have been happy just doing a few laps by myself. You know, like racing was a bonus. It was just the end goal to drive a car I built at the mountain, and I was done. You know, I was happy to hang up the helmet from there. I'm not going to, but I was happy to hang up the helmet from there. So yeah, as you mentioned, I sort of put out the feelers and I said to everyone, you know, I've kind of never asked for help on this channel before, but this is something I'd really like to do. It's a very expensive venture. And anybody that races know racing's expensive. Going and doing something like that is next level. You know, it's the little costs add up. I mean, you've got obviously all the stuff with the car. To prep the car was a lot, which I'll go into in a second, as you mentioned. But also you've got the cost of getting there. You've got the cost of accommodation and fuel. You know, it's almost $800 fuel just to tow there and back. But then also the cost of entry for that event was really expensive. You know, we're talking, what did we pay in the end? It's a bit under $3,000, I think. Then plus another 500 for hire for the pits, which was literally just a tent. and everything just kind of snowballs from there. You know, it was quite expensive. So yeah, I put out the call on the channel and said, you know, but I didn't want to just go, hey, give me money. I said, you know, would you like to be a part of it? And so what I offered was, if you donate some money, you get your name on the car. So I put people's names in the Nugget Project logo and they went on the bonnet. And then I was expecting, you know, my mum and two mates to sort of put in some money. I had, in the end, 72 names on the car.
That's really cool.
Of people who donated, and it's gone all the way out the bonnet, all the way out the roof, all the way to the end, and I've even got a few on the door. And it was really humbling, and it was so nice that people wanted to be a part of this and wanted me to go and sort of fulfill a dream. So And anybody who is listening who did donate, thank you so much. It really did blow me away. It was so nice.
And
So,
you had a lot of other people come out of the woodwork just to help you try and get to Bathurst after the issues with the engine, because as I said, that gave you added stress because you
yep,
had to basically build an engine from the get-go, from scratch. You had a spare
yep,
engine ready to be built as a standby engine, but you were going to be doing the full works on that, like do the
yep,
blueprinting of the engine and making sure
yes,
that you had as much power as legally possible, within
yep,
specs, to be
yep,
competitive, or at least somewhat competitive. But you had to
yeah,
basically abandon part of that because it had to be built very quickly. And
yes,
we saw you
yeah.
talk about that, and it was touch and go at the time for you because you didn't know if you were going to make it or not.
Yeah, it was a little bit. So to elaborate on that a little bit, basically, but yeah, I had the engine in the car, and it wasn't like a mind-blowing engine, but it was solid. I knew I could just beat on it lap after lap, and it wasn't going to break. It was happy. And as you mentioned with the engine sealing, that engine was sealed way back when I first started. Well, I say way back, it was 2 years ago when I first started racing. Um, and the engine seal I went and saw, he said to me, "Yeah, look, it's a wrecker engine. We're going to use the what did he call it? The wrecker engine policy or something." I'm like, "Sure." I didn't know anything. I was just going off him. He was a Motorsport Australia official. And so he goes, "It's a wrecker engine. I'll just sign off on that." So he basically just crossed out all the measurements and said wrecker engine. I'm like, "Cool, wicked." And I raced on that engine sealing sheet the whole time. Now, apparently that wasn't a huge issue until we came to Bathurst, because Bathurst was a national event. TV cameras there, everything had to be up to board. And there was a few issues with it wasn't many, but there was a couple of people who were taking the mickey a bit with the regulations on what you could do with engines. And so the spotlight was on us a bit to make sure that everyone was playing by the same rules. So because that kind of, it was the perfect storm, basically. A few of those things happened. They brought in this new engine sealing thing, and that all landed on Bathurst weekend. So the spotlight was on us, and I had one of the officials ring me up and go, "So what's your engine sealing sheet?" And I literally took a photo of it on my phone and sent it to him while I was on the phone to him. And he goes, "Uh-huh." He goes, "I don't think you could race at Bathurst." I'm like, "This is literally 2.5 weeks away from the event." So, okay. He said, "Yeah, that's not legal." I'm like, "Oh, but it's got the tags on it, and I've been racing on this." He goes, "Yeah, that guy, I don't think he seals engines anymore, and he wasn't using the right rules." Oh, damn. So, 2.5 weeks out. Okay, what I'll do is I'll take this engine out, because you've got to take the engine out, you've got to take the gearbox out, put it on the bench. The guy's got to sit there and he's got to turn the ratios, make sure it's all legal. Fine. Then he has to, we've got to take the cylinder head off. He has to measure all the cam lobes. He has to measure he has to take the piston out. He's going to measure the pistons, like all this sort of stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, look, I'm not going to bother with the new engine. I'm going to keep the old engine because I know it's, old reliable, old faithful, because I don't want a new engine to go pop at Mount Panorama. Well, I don't want to miss out on laps.
Yeah.
So took it all out. And then I did a video on that, said, "I'm going to do this." And one of the viewers who's into Excels, he messaged me and he said, "Have you taken the sump off yet?" I said, "No, I'm going to do that next week." He goes, "Go home tonight, take the sump off and check your middle crank cap because they have a tendency to break." I'm like, okay. So flip the engine over, took the sump off, and lo and behold, I have two massive cracks straight through cap number 3 on the crankshaft.
Wow.
Now, the problem with that is, to be honest, if I don't disturb it, it's kind of like a hornet's nest. It may never come out and sting me. But since I've got the whole thing apart and I know it's cracked, and if I'm going up Mount Panorama and the thing goes pop and I could have prevented that, I would have been very angry at myself, especially with the money it cost to go there.
Absolutely.
So, as you said, I had my spare engine sitting there, which I bought from Jolly's in Geelong, a pick-apart style place. And I only had 114,000 K in it. It's quite a newish engine for an XL anyway. So I went, well, I guess I've got to do this. I pulled the sump off that. The crank cap was fine because it had never been raced, never been beaten up. It was probably driven by a grandma. So I then had to build this engine up. I didn't want to touch the bottom end. I pulled all the caps off. The bearings look good. I'm like, fine, they're good. The XLs actually run a bit better if they're a bit more worn in. Sounds funny, but they're a bit looser. They don't zap horsepower. But I wanted to do the head. So if any of you watch the videos or go and watch the video after this, basically pulled the head off because the head had to come off to be measured, stripped it all down, cleaned everything. And I was doing this all at night after work, after filming, going to the garage, and I was up to about sort of 1 or 2 a.m. rebuilding this engine ready because I had the engine sealer booked for a few days. So anyway, he came in, we sealed it all up, and we got this engine ready, and got it in the car ready to test. So yeah, it was probably from finding out from taking out the old engine to rebuilding the new engine and getting it sealed and back in the car. I think was about 6 days. So at work.
Yeah.
Sorry, after work at night. So.
And your job, because you actually work in the media on the car side of things as well, so it goes hand in hand for you, because you actually work for Street Machine magazine amongst other clients as well as a videographer and a photographer. So that passion that you have for cars carries over into your work, and I'm sure you've had a lot of support from your colleagues who know that you do this, off your own back, and do ridiculous hours, just to earn enough money to do this, because it's not only a time-consuming exercise, but it's also consuming in the money sense.
It certainly is. Well, look, I do get the support from Street Machine, but also Hyundai Excels aren't exactly a Street Machine style car.
No.
So we have a group chat, and it's always this. I always feel a little bit the odd one out because they're talking about their VN SS Brock Special with the Simmons wheels and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, check out my little Korean shopping trolley with 1.5 litre engine. And there's a bit of a divide there. But the passion for cars shows through regardless of what you drive. It's funny because Simon Telford, the boss of Street Machine, lovely guy. You think the boss of Street Machine, he's going to have a blown 1,000 horsepower big block V8. No, he drives a Subaru Forester, and his dream car is a Subaru Vortex.
Oh, I remember those Vortexes. They're very 80s. Very 80s.
The door wedge, yep.
Yeah, very square. I remember that.
So, yeah. But
very
they do
cool.
understand my passion, and they did support me. If anybody watches Street Machine, you would have seen I did do a video for them at Bathurst as well, which was really cool. And they wanted me to do that sort of as content for them to sort of show the audience that it's not all just V8s.
Yep.
And yeah, they helped me out with the tow car as well from Ford. We got one of the new Rangers and the fuel card. So that really helped.
It must have helped a hell of a deal. And I guess you had a lot of support from the readers, and there's a lot of hardcore readers that are V8 only, that love their blown cars. Yeah, they don't care about anything else. But it must have felt good that they've came out of the woodwork just to support you and your campaign to run the Nugget Bathurst.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the comments were surprising. I was expecting, a lot of negativity. We had one negative comment out of 200, and every comment on the channel was, "This is so cool. This is great." A lot of people are saying it doesn't matter what you're driving at Bathurst. It's good to be at Bathurst. Other people are saying, it doesn't matter what the car is. It's your passion. It was really cool. And especially with some of the Street Machine audience is sort of an aging generation where they're kind of stuck in their ways. They're bleed red, bleed blue. It's Ford or Holden and all this sort of stuff, and they're quite tunnel vision with what they do. But no, it was unanimous that you're into cars, you're doing something you're stoked on, and it was actually really nice. It's good feedback.
It's fantastic feedback. Obviously, Excel racing is cheap to an extent. You did a very good video about the cost in the long term about the category and going racing in the Excels. Before you took the road going down the Excels, did you look at other categories before you chose the Excel road? Did you look at something like the Pulsar series? Did you look at HQ Holdens? Those other one-mac kind of categories, or even the multi-level categories like production cars or the like? Yeah,
I did actually. I looked at. So the Excels actually kind of took over from the HQs, to be honest. And there was sort of a lot of them were the same kind of guys or hung out in the same circles, and the Excels took over because the HQs are just too expensive to race. Like, if you bang up a door or a fender or a quarter panel on those cars now, it's going to cost you thousands to fix because they're rare. They're rare cars now. They used to be, the VN Commodores. VN Commodores aren't cheap anymore. But
no,
you know what I mean?
Not.
Like they were the old beaters, and that's why they raced them. And now they're too expensive, so that's why a lot of them moved to Excels. So the HQs was never in it for me, and it's probably too big a car for my liking. I've always been into smaller Japanese cars, but the Pulsars 100% I thought was a very cool category, and they are actually extremely quick cars. They're very underrated on a track. One of my mates, Lee Nuttall, he's one of the Vic champions in the Pulsar, sorry. And he took me for a ride in his car around Sandown, and holy cow! Like, number one, the loudest car I've ever been in. It's just ridiculous. Straight open pipes. You wouldn't think it'd be that loud. My ears were ringing for days. But it is quick. Like he was chasing down full-blown V8s on that track. They weren't getting away from him that much on the straights. And as soon as we hit the braking zones or the corners, he had them every time, overtaking like SS Commodores. There was a few purpose-built race cars, and it's just unbelievable how quick those things were. So yeah, look, really cool cars. The downside with the Pulsars, and I really hope it's something they can resolve, and I don't know why it is, there's not that many of them racing. And they often have to combine with the 2-litre sports sedan to have sort of a full race grid. And that kind of made me, I mean, I guess I'm part of the problem, because if I had have joined, then they would have had one more car. But the XLs always have full grids, and it's never a problem. Like I can't race all the time. So my option to be able to just jump in on a race and know that I'm going to have 25, 30 people to race against is awesome. You know, with the Pulsars, you know, a field of 10 or 11 or 12, it just kind of wasn't an option, which is sad, as I said, because it's a fantastic category and the cars are really good. So maybe it's something they will pick up in the future. I don't know why it's the case, but that kind of steered me towards the XLs as well.
Is there more ease of access with the XLs over the Pulsars?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the information. I mean, now there's so many parts and so much information for building an XL. I mean, probably a little thanks to me, but other people too. And there's builders for XLs. Like there's so much out there. Yeah, maybe it's just ease of building a car. You know, there's off the shelf race parts now. You can go and get specific race wheels for an XL, because the XL wheels aren't. They've got this weird hub assembly where you actually need cutouts for the bolt to hold the disc on. So it's not just a wheel shop thing, you know, like to get the right offset and stuff. Now you can buy them off the shelf. XL race wheels are super light. Like I've got the Koenigs. There's like, you know, maybe 3 or 4 different brands of race exhausts you can buy off the shelf for these cars. You know, there's just so many options. So I think that's probably a bit of a, you know, you can actually just go and buy the parts and bolt them on yourself and make the car.
It's really cool, isn't it? It's a great thing how it's just taken off, and you know, there's so many cars around the country. Like you're getting full grids around the country, and not just that, you're now getting professional teams, like the actual supercar teams that have actually built their own XLs just for driver development. And like we saw Brock Feeney race in XLs before he started in supercars. Russ Wingle's done it. Jess Dane, who's of course Roland's daughter, she's raced in XLs briefly in a very similar colour car to yours, it must be said.
It is actually.
Yeah. You know, we see all these professional teams building up these XLs, and some are saying, you know, having them, they may be outpricing, or maybe keeping people out because it's getting too expensive. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's all relative?
Yes and no. Like it's, as somebody who builds their own car and doesn't pay anyone to do anything. I mean, I got my mate to build my roll cage, but everything else on my car I do myself, including alignment and all that. So when I go to the track and I've got my trailer and I've got my Volvo boot full of tools, and that's the extent of it, I'm often in the paddock as well. I don't hire pits because I'm trying to save money. And then you get a guy literally come along with a car transporter and lower his XL out of it. And you go, oh, damn. Like it's, if it's an intimidation tactic, it works really well. But
usually does.
Just seeing that sort of money, or even just the caliber of some of the names. Like I've pitted next to the Kelly family. You know, Todd Kelly's son, Mason. He races, and I've pitted next to them a couple of times. And just seeing the Kelly name on the car, you're like, oh, geez, like that's full on. And you know, like he's got a V8 supercar steering wheel on that car. I mean that steering wheel's worth more than my whole car. And they've got like, you know, professional alignment stuff. And Todd's obviously a wealth of knowledge. So you know that car is set up perfectly. You know, they're warming up the gearbox. They've got the car up on stands with the engine running, the heaters on the gearbox and all this sort of stuff. And they're measuring the oil with like little pipettes and stuff. And I'm like, holy crap, I literally got here and just turned it on and checked my tire pressures. Like, so yes, it is. I think some of the, like the AAA built cars are just beautifully built, but also some of the not as well known. I mean, obviously the AAA and Kelly Racing and things like that, they're very well known. But there's like Adam Macro, who's the V8 supercar, well, still an excellent racer, but was a V8 supercar racer. He builds XLs now. That's pretty much his full-time gig. And Adam's a great guy. He helps everybody. He's a lovely dude. But his cars, his knowledge on XLs is ridiculous. And he builds very, very quick cars. Like Glenn McKenzie, who won the championship in Victoria last year, Adam built his car. And honestly, I feel like if I got in Glenn's car, I could probably knock a second off my lap straight away. Like they're built so well. So I don't know if the big teams like Kelly Racing or Triple Eight are as good as people like Adam, just because they are race car builders, but they're not XL builders, if you understand.
Yeah.
There is definitely a big level difference between the people who are just building a wrecker engine car, basically bolt a cage in, go racing. Myself, who's kind of in the middle ground, and then the people like Adam's top guys and Triple Eight and all those, like there is a big disparity between the back ends of the field and the front end of the field. It's not like V8 supercars where they're all, within a second of each other. We're talking 7-8 seconds a lap difference between the front and the back guys, and that's all through setup, experience, and well-built cars. So,
Well, I got to say, you've actually improved your times in the last couple of years, because not only have you rebuilt the
Thank
car in
God.
recent times, I know, I know, but you have actually put quite a bit of effort. You've done some driver training with Adam, and you've actually rebuilt the car, and you've found more time, and you've been able to move up the grid a fair bit. So it's not like you're just turning up and just driving. You've put quite a bit of effort, and a lot of it off your own back. So
yeah,
you've got to be proud of what you've achieved in the last few years, particularly now that you're doing all these circuit racing events.
yeah, I think so. The big change was I had a race at Winton where I was doing okay, and at Phillip Island, I actually do okay. Phillip Island's known as a momentum track. So for us, as long as we can keep the momentum and the speed going, we're okay. Tracks like Winton rely on sort of a bit more engine power because you've got all these second gear turns where you slow right down and then you need the power to power out of them. I had a race at Winton. I was doing okay at the Phillip. I did like 2 or 3 Phillip Island races back to back, and I was moving up the grid and I was doing okay. I was sort of sitting maybe 2/3 of the way through the pack, which is okay. I had a good sort of 6-7 guys behind me. I felt pretty good. And then we had this race at Winton, and I think a lot of it too was a lot of people were out of money and a lot of the back markers didn't come. I was probably one of the slower guys to arrive, but then I found I just wasn't competitive, and I was literally being left for dead. Like every race would start off and they would just clear off from me, and it was really disheartening because, as we said, racing's not cheap, and this whole weekend probably cost me $2.5 grand, a bit more to go there in the race, and I was out by myself. Like the pack cleared off, and I was by myself, just basically doing a track day, and that really discouraged me. I felt, well, I may as well just go to track days. I'm doing this. I'm not racing against anyone. I want to be racing. And there was a few reasons for this. My engine was getting a bit tired. I didn't have buff tires, so we actually buff the tires down, which means we actually take tread off them, which means the blocks on the tires don't heat up, and it gives you a much more it basically gives you a grippier tire. I won't go into the finer details of that. I didn't have buff tires, and I had the older suspension. I didn't have the brand new suspension.
Yeah.
So, which was another cost, and I was trying not to spend. And I think it was that event that made me go, right, if I'm going to keep doing this, I've got to do something about this car. Yes, I need seat time, but I know this car is at least 2 seconds slower than it should be. And so, yeah, before Bathurst, I started doing this rebuild before I even got the golden ticket at Bathurst. I just went, I'm going to make this car faster. And yeah, I got, new lightweight wheels. I pulled 23 kilos in the end, I think, out of the car, which
I remember
is pretty
that.
huge.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have to be, our minimum weight is 1,000 kilos with the driver in the car at the end of the race. So you kind of have to manage your fuel and make sure when you get on the scales at the end, you're the right weight. So I pulled a bunch of weight out the car, got the lightweight wheels, which is good because that's rotational mass, it helps you with braking and steering and acceleration. And obviously the new engine. So new engine, and I went a bit thinner with the head gasket, got a bit more compression, just fresher engine all up, and it made pretty good power, new exhaust, yada, 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 all these parts. And yeah, and then the last race I did at Phillip Island, I don't have my figures on here. I think I knocked 2 and a bit seconds off, 2.5 seconds off my personal best.
Pretty decent.
It's huge. It's huge, and I didn't even really get to push it. So yeah, I thought that was pretty good. So obviously the development on the cars worked, and my development as a driver's getting there. I'm still very, very amateur though, so very amateur. Yeah.
I've got to ask, now that you've learnt so much in your racecraft, and there's obviously more to come, obviously you've gone to Adam, who's a very well-known supercars driver in his own right. He's, good driver talent. He's taught you a few key points here and there. Have you thought of doing other things like going to Paul Morris, for example, and doing the advanced driver courses at the Motorplex in Norwell and learning from him as well?
Yeah, maybe. I tell you what, I've had an offer from Lachlan Ward. I don't know if you know him.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, so he drives the Aussie cars.
Aussie racing cars. I know a couple
Aussie racing
people.
cars.
Yeah, I know a couple people that race in Aussie racing cars. So
Yes. So Lockie's a really nice guy, and he's killer. He raced in Formula Ford and all that sort of stuff, and he's done really well, and he's a very talented driver, and he raced in Excels as well.
Yeah.
And he actually reached out to me and said, if you get to Sydney, I will give you a full day of driver training.
perfect.
He's like, just bring your cameras. And I'm like, of course I'm going to bring my camera. So
Of course you will.
that is something I've been trying to tee up, but just obviously money and budgets, towing the car up there and all that sort of stuff. But I will definitely reach out to Lockie in the future because he does driver training as his job.
That at Sydney Motorsport Park, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've never raced there as yet, have you?
I haven't, and I really want to, because everyone that goes there comes back and goes, it is so much fun. So,
It is, trust me. It is a cool track. And we would love to have you here at one point. It'd be really, really cool.
I'll be there.
This is the Motor Dream Podcast.
I want to move into your love of cars now, away from racing, because you do love your Japanese cars. You're a JDM man through and through, and you openly admit that. You got a Toyota Sora. You did rebuild a Subaru Liberty RS, I think it was, or RX from memory, for as a road going thing.
Yeah,
that was why was it stupid? Come on.
Oh my God. Okay. So the Sora was my daily, and it's a beautiful car. It was my dad's midlife crisis car. He wanted to buy a Porsche, and I said, Dad, no, don't do it. Like getting parts for the Porsche, daily driving the Porsche, and I showed him this Sora. And I'm like, Dad, you got to get this Sora. And he's like, no, they've got airbag problems. I'm like, no, this one's on coilovers. It's like the proper. You're not going to have problems with it. He went and test drove it. Goes, I'm going to buy this car, and he loved it. He drove it anyway. He handed it down to me after he'd finished with it. I rebuilt it, and that was my daily. But now, because it's one of the rarer models, it's a factory manual, stuff like that. I didn't want to, and it's straight. There's not a dent on the car. It's beautiful, and I don't know if you've been driving in Melbourne lately, but
I haven't been for a while.
Here,
I haven't driven. I've driven in Melbourne. I know about the hook. I know about the hook turns. Don't you worry. I know everything about hook turner stand. Apologies, Sammy J. But no, I know what Melbourne traffic is like. I have driven through Melbourne. It's terrific. It's fun.
Yeah, it's gambling with your life every day. So I did not want my beautiful car to get damaged. So I'm like, convinced my wife. I said, look, if I can get a little car cheap and fix it up, I'm going to use that as a daily. She's like, that's fine. So I found a stupid bloody Impreza that was supposed to be an RX on Gumtree for $1,000. I bought it, got it home. It had 3 massive chrome wheels and 1 space saver.
Oh.
And after I finally went through the whole car, I thought, I shouldn't have bought this thing because it had the cuts cut out of it. And it literally, when I say a straight pipe, it literally had a pipe that was dead straight from the muffler to the front of the car and just went under.
Oh,
yes.
No, and it would have made a horrible noise.
It made a horrible noise. It still had welding rods sticking out of it where they welded it on. It was still so bad. The car was a mess, but for some reason, I brought it upon myself. I'm like, I'm going to rescue this thing. So I repainted it. I got a new exhaust, new cats for it, so it's road legal.
Oh my goodness!
Got some nice wheels for it. Like I rebuilt, and it was an automatic. And the worst thing was, I then had head gasket problems because it's a Subaru. So I pulled the heads off it to redo the heads, and realised it was actually a single cam.
Oh.
And it wasn't an RX. It was actually a GX with an RX front end. So anyway, it was a mess of a car, but I ended up putting way too much time and effort into this stupid thing, and I sold it to a P-plated girl who drove away with the biggest smile on her face because she had a car that was basically brand new. And then I bought my GT Liberty that has been another headache, but we won't go into that.
No, it's a good headache because you do love those cars, and JDMs. Why the JDM type of cars? What makes them so much fun to drive, or so much fun to actually maintain? Well, if they're a fun thing to do, if you know what I mean.
I think they're brilliant. I don't know. I mean, it obviously came from Dad working for Honda. He actually worked on the release of the NSX when it came to Europe.
Oh.
So his job for 6 weeks was to take the NSX around to rich people, let them test drive it. He went through a set of tires a week. It was brilliant. So that kind of started my love for these Japanese cars. I mean, that's a pretty special Japanese car to start a love affair with.
Oh, totally.
But then after that, Dad kind of obviously pushed me towards Japanese cars because he knew how to fix them. So, when I bought my cars, he could always go, we could fix this car together. And that was good. So I bought a little sleeker as my first car, and I fell in love with, lightweight, revvy, fun, and I think very easy to work on. A Toyota, a Subaru, a Nissan, you can rebuild the whole thing with a 10, 12, 14, 17, and a 19 mil spanner and 2 screwdrivers. Like, that's it. It's such a basic thing to work on. And then, I kind of elaborated from there. Like, I love the Sleekers. I got involved in the Sleeker Club, and then I found a GT4 Sleeker, the rally car.
Yes.
It was the one with the rounder one with the pop-up headlights, the
SC185. Yes.
And I just, that was my full love affair from whatever it was, 19 to 21 for about, 2-3 years, whatever it was. And I went through 2 engines on that thing. I went through about 3 clutches. I was putting brass button clutches in it and doing 7-gram launches, just being an idiot teenager. My God, it was so good. It blew flames every single gear, just straight, no cat. And just every time you change gear, just go, bah, the exhaust. Oh, God, I love that thing. It was so good. It just made all stupid Japanese choo-choo noises. It was great.
I have to add on to that because I got a friend of mine. He actually owned a Datsun 1200 Ute for years, a couple of years, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it had a brass button clutch in it. So I think it must have had an SR20 motor in it, naturally aspirated or something, and it had a brass button clutch. So he was high revving the hell out of it, when launching, and you had to get it at the right point with the clutch and when you released it. Otherwise, if you released it too early or too late, it would pop and splutter and everything. And
they're the worst thing you could do to a street car, honestly.
Oh.
Yeah, I had a 3-button brass button clutch in it, and I remember at one point I was working anybody who lives in Melbourne, I was working in Chadstone. I lived out at the end of the freeway. So it was about a 45-minute drive, and in peak hour traffic, driving on the freeway with a three-button brass button clutch. My word, that was, I remember my leg was so sore because it was the strongest clutch pedal on it, like the spring on it. I remember one day I had to pull into the emergency lane. I was almost in tears because my leg was hurting so much in peak hour traffic. I was like, I'm going to have to just sit here and have a moment because it was just so horrible to drive. But
I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh, but it's just so funny.
I brought it upon myself, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you came to your senses of it because you've just become a parent for the first time. Congratulations for that. You obviously got the Subaru Liberty now, the GT, so something more sensible. You say it's a good problem to have. Why is it a good problem?
The GT, bloody hell. I bought this car. I've always loved these. For anyone that watches Mighty Car Mods, it's basically the same car as Super Grams.
Yep.
So it's the 4th gen Liberty wagon. I always thought they were one of the greatest looking wagons. It's got the bonnet scoop. It's what we refer to as the gentleman's WRX. It's a beautiful car. And I bought this thing. I bought an automatic because my wife drives it from time to time. She drives the auto, and it makes sense as the daily. So I got this car, fell in love with it. I'm like, this thing's brilliant. But when I test drove it, I'm like, it's got a bit of a vibration when you turn left. Well, I'm sure I figured out it'd be a wheel bearing or something. Anyway, I went to this car with a fine-tooth comb trying to find this bloody vibration. Do you think I could find it?
No.
It got to the point, my mate, he lived up the road from my old house, Josh Lyon, lovely guy. And I said to him, Josh, you've got to have a look at this car for me. He had it for a week. He's like, mate, I cannot figure this thing out. This is ridiculous. So on the forums, the guy's like, it's got to be your center diff in the gearbox. Like, great. So I tracked down a whole new gearboxes and transfer case. Josh and I put that in on a Saturday morning, took it for a test drive, exactly the same thing. Did not solve the problem. My old gearbox is still sitting under his bench in his workshop, by the way, but, we'll deal with that another day. So this went on for ages. I was about ready to throw this car out. I took it to a guy who used to be the main rally mechanic for the Subaru Rally team. So I think he actually worked with Possum Bourne and a bunch of these guys, like super knowledgeable guy. He had the car for a week. He rang me up every day going, can't figure it out. It's just the weirdest thing. Anyway, turns out it was something incredibly obvious. It was a wheel bearing on the front left. Now, you'd think anybody would have picked that up. He handed me the wheel bearing off the desk and he goes, "Can you find anything wrong with this?" Literally, it's some weird manufacturing thing. None of us can understand it to this day. It vibrated when you turn left when it had no load on it, but no one could. The only way he figured it out is his 2IC said, "Let's just remove all the 4 hubs and just put 4 new hubs on it," and then it stopped.
Oh,
So it was the weirdest thing. Anyway, so this was the problem I had with this bloody Liberty, and I fell in love with this car, and I hated it for years, and now, anyway, so it's now working, and it's a fantastic car. It drinks fuel. It still smells like oil because it's leaking out of somewhere, but I still love it. So, yeah.
that's really cool. That's a really cool car. I have a soft spot for Subarus, and I will tell a bit of a story before we move on and learn a little bit more about your car interest. I love the RS Turbo Liberty. From the early 90s. I thought they were a brilliant car. Just a very early 90s look, a bit boxy shape, but they just sort of had that nice roundness to it and that beautiful boxer 4 engine. Just beautiful. And there's a part of me that wished it was raced as a Group A touring car back in the early 90s before, Group A died in the bum. But, hey, it was a great rally car and great success for many years and led on to what we saw with the Impreza. But you know what I also liked, and this is going to sound very weird, I like the Subaru XVX, and that's an interesting car because 12-year-old me thought, what if there was another manufacturer in the then new V8 touring car formula at the time, which is now, of course, supercars. And, of course, supercars did eventually go down the multi-manufacturer route 10 years ago, but if they'd done it at the time, I would have loved to have had an SVX with something of a similar body kit to, say, a Holden or a Ford, but run a small block Chevy V8 because Subaru at the time was part owned by General Motors. So that was it. There was this part of me to think, wouldn't this look good with a V8 motor and everything? And of course, the SVX never came with an automatic, but you had to put a manual in somehow. But just the weird and wonderful things in my head that was going on at the time.
Yeah.
I thought it would have been a great thing, but it just looked weird with the twin windows at the front and rear, and it was a weird car.
Very quirky car, yeah.
Very weird car.
Windows were great until you had to go through a drive-through at Macca's, and it only had like the bottom section of the window open.
Yes.
It was a cool car, I reckon. Like it looked very space age for its time.
It absolutely did, but just never really took off. It was just one of those cars that looked great in theory, but just didn't really work. So
yeah, that's it. Look, Subarus get a bad rap. I think they're a fantastic car. Like everyone there's the head gasket joke. Everyone goes on about how they're quite boring cars, and then there's the whole vaping thing. You got to wear a Monster Energy hat and you got to vape if you drive one. But like I had a Forester GT, and I bought that as my sensible car after my GT4 because I was living up at the snow. And that thing was brilliant. It was a manual, so it was basically the WX engine, WX gearbox, just higher. And it was so much fun. It was great going up the mountains. It was brilliant in the snow. You could drive it like a rally car through the snow. And because it was so light, Falls Creek Village we actually close the roads off once it snows, and you got to park down the hill. But there's a crossover period where they haven't closed the roads, but there's snow on the roads. So most people get their cars out the village because they all get stuck. I was the only one still driving around the village because the car's so light, it would actually stay on top of the snow. And so I ended up driving the CEO of the company back up to a lodge and all this sort of stuff because it was the only car that could actually stay in the village. It was so good. It was such a fun car. I loved it.
Amazing. All right. I want to learn a little bit more about how Matthew Hole really ticks as a car person. I want to know a little bit deeper about your interest. I want to ask you the first car you drove. It can be when you were growing up with your dad, or maybe the first car that you bought when you grew up.
No, I actually know this. So the first car I ever drove was a gold Rolls Royce next to a river.
What?
When I was about 5 years old, I sat on my mate's lap, and he goes, "You want to drive my car?" I'm like, "All right." He's one of my dad's mates, and I sat in his lap and I steered, and he literally put his hands behind his head and let me steer, and we were right next to a river because we were near a boat marina, and my mum's in the back seat freaking out because her 5-year-old son's driving this expensive Rolls Royce next to the water. So that was the first car I ever drove. But I learned how to drive because we grew up in a small farm, and my dad, for a while, was running a fencing company. So I used to go on school holidays and help him with the fencing company. We had a 4Runner. And I'll tell you what, the easiest way to learn how to drive a manual is a 4-wheel drive in low ratio, because you can just let the clutch out and it just goes. So Dad just put it in low and he just let me drive around, and we'd have the roll of wire on the back, and he'd staple it to the fence post, and then I'd drive along the fence and he'd walk along and staple the wire along as I drove the car. So yeah, probably the Forerunner was the first car I kind of drove when I was, whatever, 12, 13, 14.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then yeah, actually, I did say my first car was a Sleeker. That's a little bit of a lie. My first car was a Mini, and I wish I still had it. But our
Oh,
friends gave us a little Leyland Mini, so the round headlights. People know the Leyland Minis if they're
yeah,
into
square.
minis.
Yeah, it had the square front, but the round headlights. I know the one you're
That's
talking
it.
about.
That's
Yep.
the one. Yeah.
Yep.
And it had a broken crankshaft, and so they gave it to us and said, our Minis back then weren't worth anything. So we bought another Mini that was delivered on its roof, a green one. So we pulled the engine out, and yeah, we put that engine in this Mini, and Dad bought, I'm not joking here, a 44-gallon drum of red paint, and we painted the Mini and every single piece of farm machinery on the farm with this red paint. So it's hilarious. The tractors, the thrasher, the baler, everything was this red, the same as the Mini. So it's quite funny. But we painted that and we got it working. And then this was when I was about 15, and I used to drive it around the farm, and it was great fun. But then I think the JDM bug hit me, and when I saw this little Sleeker of my mates, I went, oh, I want that. And I bought that before I turned 18 and before I could start driving. So
It's really cool. Man, I bet you wish you kept that Mini now, given how old they are.
don't start me. Yeah.
Love it. What about the first road trip you remember going on?
Geez. It's first road trip. I don't know. I mean, we did a lot of road trips in England, but I was pretty young. I think I remember when we first, because I was born over in England. We moved over when I was 9. I think probably when we moved here, Dad bought a Forerunner, and we drove up to the snow. I think within the first couple of weeks, he'd met some guys here, and they said, "You want to come to the snow?" We're like, all right. So I probably we used to do a lot of road trips doing that. And I remember the week after I got my learner's permit, we did another trip to the snow. I had a love affair with the snow as well, but yeah, but Dad said, "All right, we're going to drive up there. You drive," and he literally just fell asleep and just let me drive up to the snow in his Subaru Outback at the time.
It's a good way to
So
learn.
I drove the 2.5 or 3 hours up to Mount Buller by myself in the Subaru with Dad asleep. So
Really
yeah.
cool. What about the worst car that you ever owned? Or was it the one that we just mentioned before, which was a Subaru Impreza RX supposed RX? Is that the worst car you've owned?
I don't know. I don't think I've owned a bad car, to be honest. They've all had problems. I mean, I bought that Forester, and I love that thing. And then a week later, the transfer case just went and exploded. And so, literally outside a Subaru dealership, and
Oh,
I
no.
wheeled it in there, and I paid them $2,500 when I was pretty young to rebuild it for me, and that hurt a lot. So I was pretty unimpressed with that car for a while. I don't know. I don't think I've actually had a car that I think is really bad. I mean, the Impreza wasn't impressive, but geez, it used no fuel, and when I finished with it, it was a great little car. So yeah, I'm going to go with none of them so far. But my life is still young. We'll see.
Exactly. What about eating in cars? Yes or no?
What was that? Sorry.
Eating in cars.
I should say no, but no, I eat in cars all the time. Yeah.
Yep. I think we're all guilty of that, especially when you're doing road trips to a racetrack. You need to have sustenance. A Macca's drive-through is the thing to do, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, and I do. I not as much now, but I used to drive a lot for work. So I'm as a photographer and videographer, I basically go where the work is, and I'd be doing trips to Adelaide and trips to Sydney. You've got to eat. You've got to eat on a road trip to Sydney. It's 10 hours of the most boring road in the world. So yeah, if you're not snacking, you're falling asleep. Yeah.
It is a boring road, isn't it? That Hume Highway. Just
It should be 160. Don't get me started.
Oh, you have no idea how much I hate driving. Even driving to Goulburn. Oh, I hate driving to Goulburn just on that bit of road. Because Wakefield Park, of course, which is currently closed, but hopefully reopen soon.
Fingers crossed, because I want to drive there for sure.
It's a cool track. It's a really cool track. What about the best memory you've had in a car? And be PG about it here.
Yeah. Why does everybody's mind go to the dirty place?
Well, I don't know. I have no idea why. Because you can do so many things in a car. Let's put it that way. So let's be clean about it here.
That's true. I mean, I think the racing stuff's pretty pretty bloody good. Like obviously Bathurst was a big
Yeah.
one, and having my mate Aaron Semler behind me, like looking in the rearview mirror, driving Bathurst, and looking behind and seeing a good mate behind me chasing me, that's a pretty cool feeling.
Mm.
I don't think it gets much better than that. I've had a lot of cool adventures in cars, like lots of road trips. Um, I mean, a mate and I once when we were 19, we just, it was a Friday night, we worked together, and he goes, "What are you doing this weekend?" "Oh, I don't know." He goes, "My parents have got a place at Halls Gap. Do you want to go there?" I'm like, "Yeah, all right." And we just jumped in my little old Celica and we drove down there. And he might have questioned how quick this thing will go, and we gave it a bit of a nudge.
As you do.
Obviously, yeah, in Mexico, obviously it wasn't on Victorian roads, but yeah, things like that, and then having a run down the mountain from Halls Gap and the brakes turning blue and smoke coming off the brakes and all these dumb things you do when you're a kid. Like they're all good adventures. I love that sort of stuff. I do work for a company from time to time called Ultimate Driving Tours, and they do supercar tours, and I've worked with them quite a bit. And I did work on the drive team on their European tour.
Yeah.
And I think driving through the mountains in Europe, chasing supercars, I only had a diesel Mercedes, but a brand new one, so it's pretty nippy.
Mm.
Booting around after an Aventador, watching flames come out the back as we're going down the mountains in Italy. I think you kind of do a little pinch yourself. This is pretty wild. This is pretty cool stuff, But I'm actually out here doing this, so that's got to be up there for sure.
Unbelievable. It's a really cool thing. I want to do that one day, just to go through like the Swiss Alps or whatever and just experience it like I don't know, maybe in a BMW or something, because that would just be
100%.
like an M3.
Focus RS.
Sorry?
Focus RS would be pretty good for that.
Or a Ford Sierra RS Cosworth. I'd like to do that. Yeah.
Where are you gonna find one of them?
I know. They're worth a lot of money now.
They are.
But hey, you can only dream. You can only dream.
That's it.
All right. Matthew Hull.
Mm.
This is the real reason why we got you on the podcast. You wake up one morning and you check your phone, as everyone does when they wake up. It's the first thing you do. And you see a text message and it says, "Please check your bank balance." And you think, what is this all about? So you check the bank app on your phone and you find out that your bank balance just skyrocketed to Elon Musk levels. You've become an instant billionaire, and you just go, what the hell's just happened? Is this a dream or something? You then get an email from this mystery benefactor. You have no idea who it is, and it tells you that you can do whatever you like with the money, and you can buy whatever car, bike or machine you like. But the caveat is you're only allowed 3 in your dream garage. So with that in mind, what is the first car that you would like to have in your dream garage?
Okay, before we get started here, you've killed me with this question, by the way.
I have.
You asked me this a couple of weeks ago.
I did.
And it has played on my mind. I actually asked the Street Machine guys. We've got a chat with all the contributors and the editor and everyone. I've never seen that chat go off so hard than when I asked them the same question. You should have seen it. It was ridiculous.
I'm sorry. I probably have killed my chances of working for Street Machine ever again. So, sorry, guys. Anyway.
It started a battle. But anyway.
I bet.
I digress. So, okay. There's a million cars I could have had in this list, obviously. Yeah. And it's very hard to go past things like my favorite car I've ever driven is a Porsche 911 Carrera S. That was like 2019. Right. I thought that thing was just phenomenal.
Right.
But you're giving me all the money in the world.
Yes.
I can't just go and buy a $210,000 Porsche. We've got to think bigger than that. So with that in mind, and I think this is probably going to be on a lot of people's lists, my first car would be a Ferrari F40.
Okay, well, there is one person that has mentioned the Ferrari F40, so that's all right. And we've spoken about it previously in the podcast, so that's a good start. Rochelle Gilmore, former Australian pro cyclist who's a Commonwealth Games gold medalist, she's mentioned that she'd like to have a Ferrari F40, and it is a very beautiful car. I mean, it's the epitome of the 80s supercar as far as I'm concerned. You just look at it.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant. Yeah. Like 2.9 litre twin turbocharged V8, and it produces 471 brake horsepower with a 5-speed gearbox, and it doesn't sound much, but when you look at it and how fast it goes, I mean, it's just beautiful, just utterly beautiful.
It's a beautiful car, and it's the cool thing about that is, well, number one, it's Ferrari Enzo's last hurrah.
Correct.
So that was the car he built as before he passed away. I'm actually not a massive fan of Ferraris. I think they're beautiful cars, but when you go, a lot of people go, "Oh, I want a Ferrari." It's never been a real sort of passion car for me. I'm sort of more into the Porsches and the German engineering.
Yeah.
Um, but I felt like the F40 was they went, no, we're going to ditch the sing-song V8, the glorious notes and all the trumpets and all that, and we're going to build a car that's legitimately ridiculously fast. First carbon tub supercar ever made as well.
True.
And they put turbos on it, which muffles that beautiful Ferrari V8 sound, and it was purely made to just do one thing, and that was to just be ridiculously quick. And I love that. I love that they just threw everything out the window that Ferrari's known for and made this car. And it's
it's just beautiful, and they're so highly sought after. It's just, yeah. I just look at one and you go, yeah, that if I've ever wanted to own a Ferrari, that would be it. I'm not a Ferrari man either myself, but I do love it. It just epitomizes what an 80s supercar is all about. And then they tried to eclipse that with the F50, and if anything, they actually made it worse. It was a terrible car.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it was great performance-wise. I'm sure it drives amazing, but the look of it, you just kind of went, it just didn't have the same feel, It felt like the sequel that wasn't quite as good, but like a fantastic car.
Of course, and it was made specifically for the 40th anniversary of Ferrari, so it was quite quite prophetic at the time that car was, as you said, the last one that Enzo Ferrari built under his in his lifetime, and it was, to me, I still think it's the ultimate Ferrari. It's just a beautiful car.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yep.
All right, the second car in your dream garage, what would it be?
Look, I have to have a Japanese car on this list, or it's just...
I had no doubt there was going to be a Japanese car in there somewhere.
And I feel the ultimate Japanese car, and most people would go like the R35, the R34 V-Spec or something like that, and I think they're fantastic. But for me, it's the Lexus LFA.
Lexus LSA? Ooh.
LFA, yeah. It is the best-sounding road car ever made. And I'll fight you in the comments on this one.
Oh, okay. So the LFA. Okay, wow.
LFA. So yeah. So V10, 4.8 liter V10. It's 550 odd horsepower. So it's not out of control. But $9,500 red line in a V10. It sounds like a Formula One car. The engine revs so fast from idle to $9,500. It revs from idle to $9,500 in 0.6 of a second. So they had to. It was the first car to have a digital tacho in it because a mechanical one couldn't keep up.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at it because Yamaha had an involvement with it as well.
Yes.
Which is bizarre because Yamaha, their forays into four-wheel automotive is very few and far between, and they weren't really that successful a manufacturer engine-wise in Formula One. But for them to collaborate with Toyota to build this thing, I mean,
they actually collabed on the famous 1J and 2JZs, and also the 3S GTE out of the rally car.
They did too, yeah.
All the heads, the cylinder heads on all those engines were built in collaboration with Yamaha. And so obviously they hit Yamaha up again to make this just perfection of an engine. And if you haven't heard this car, you've got to jump on YouTube and listen to some sounds of this thing running.
I'm going to have to do it after we finish this. 500 of these things were built between December 2010 and 2012. It's a two-door coupe, front to mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, and 6-speed sequential transmission. I'm just, wow, that is just
pretty serious car, and it's wild because this is kind of like the Japanese Bugatti Veyron. They built it as this is what we can do kind of thing, as opposed to we want to make money. So when they started developing it, they made it with an aluminium chassis, aluminum for you Americans, and they built the chassis. And then when they were sort of getting close to the end of development, they went, no, it's not light enough, it's not stiff enough, and they scrapped the entire thing and started getting carbon fiber. This is when the car was almost finished, and then they scrapped it all, started getting carbon fiber, and it just added like another 3-4 years onto development. It was outrageous. And once again, it was just an exercise in this is what we can do. And Jeremy Clarkson still rates it as one of the best cars he's ever driven. And I would kill to drive one, but I could never afford one because they are just going up in value every second of the day.
I'm just stunned. I'm just looking at around the Nürburgring, it did a reported test, courtesy of National Geographic's show Mega Factories. So in 2011, it went around the Nürburgring, driven by Aida Akira, and it set a record time for production vehicles at the time of 7 minutes 14 seconds. They wanted to break the 720 benchmark, and they did that by 6 seconds. That's just incredible.
Yeah, pretty cool. But I think it's the noise of that car. Once again, go and have a listen to it afterwards. But it's by far the best sounding road car I've ever heard. It's unbelievable.
It looks beautiful. Like, it still stands like a modern car in this day and age. It just goes, yeah, drive me. It's beautiful. I love it.
The only thing I don't like about it is the steering wheel looks like a cheap Autobahn steering wheel, in my opinion.
Oh, isn't that the worst?
Yeah, everything's kind of nice. The interior's pretty good, and they've got the steering wheel that looks like a, Autobahn, what do you call it, Auto Technica one.
Oh, yes. Oh, no. Actually, James May once said that he thought that the Lexus LS400, the original Lexus LS400, was going to be a classic car in future years. I don't know. I look at that and I just think it looks so out of place. Like, it's so 80s. Like, it doesn't look like a classic to me. I don't know. I look at that, like the LFA, and that looks like a classic. That's like a proper classic car, like classic supercar that anyone can really drive if they wanted to, if they had the money. But, that's I think that craps over any Lexus LS400 any day, to be quite honest.
I agree.
All right. The third and final car in your dream garage.
Okay, so I've got to have a race car, full-blown race car.
Absolutely.
And, I know you have a love for the old 5-cylinder engine.
I do.
So I originally thought it'd be great to have an Audi, like one of the S9 Group B rally cars. However, I don't know how to drive on dirt. I would kill myself in about 2 seconds of that thing.
You can always ask Molly Taylor to drive one because she owns one.
Does she?
She does.
Oh, Molly, amazing.
Great driver too.
Okay.
Great driver.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. I follow her on social. She's incredible. I love what she's doing at the moment.
Same.
Yeah,
She's done very well.
So, I think my last car would be the Audi 90 GTO, which was basically the IMSA touring car.
I know of this
where
car.
they took the S9 engine out of the Group B rally car. They stuck it in this thing. It was a full tubular chassis with carbon fiber and composite panels. It weighed 900 kilos and was 720 horsepower with the Audi 5-cylinder turbo engine.
Oh,
and the Quattro system, the all-wheel drive system.
Yeah,
so,
I've seen videos of this. It epitomises what IMSA was back in the 80s, because nearly every manufacturer took part in IMSA. It was a very competitive series, and Audi really took it exceptionally seriously. Like, Hans Stuck was brought in to drive these cars against America's best, and basically they whipped the wheels off everyone. It was a brilliant car, absolutely brilliantly engineered, and that's what Audi is remembered for. They're beautiful engineering, and also the all drive, the Quattro system, fantastic. Plus that 5-cylinder.
Yep, it was the all drive that the Americans weren't really big on that. They had Jeeps, and then they had all their sports cars were rear wheel drive. So for somebody to come in with an all-wheel drive monster that was actually good, it just wiped the floor with everything. It was brilliant, and it's such a cool-looking car. So, like, massive haunches, big square in all the right places, side exit exhaust with flames everywhere, like gigantic. The 80s style turbo where they didn't do anything, and then they tried to kill you straight away when the boost came on. That sort of turbo, and just chirping noise. Once again, this is another car you need to go and have a Google and listen to the videos, because it just makes these fantastic turbo and chirping noises, and that 5-cylinder roaring. It's a wild car.
Oh, and it's still highly revered to this very day. I mean, the fact that it shocked the establishment in America, not just in the Sporting Car Club of America, but also IMSA, like, that's a pretty big deal. Like, it's just one of those cars that you take it to Goodwood now or whatever for an historic event, everyone just goes, oh, it's just...
Everyone flocks to it, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it. And, of course, Audi was so successful, they eventually abandoned America and went back to Germany and raced in the DTM, and they won that too. So anything that Audi do, they do it. They don't do it by halves. They go all out, and they do it very, very well. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what Audi do when they enter Formula One in about 3 years. It's going to be very, very interesting. That will be
interesting, actually. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they don't have, obviously, the old Group B and the IMSA kind of open field to be able to do what they want, but it'll still be interesting to see what they do.
Totally. And they bought into Sauber. They've completely bought out Sauber. So, as like I said, they won't do things by halves. It's going to be very, very serious.
No.
I love it. I love what you've got there. I know, and I know you probably caused so many arguments. I'm sorry, Street Machine. I would love to hear what they have to. I would love to hear what they have to say. Maybe we might have to get the editor of Street Machine on for
Yeah,
a chat.
absolutely. Well, look, I'll tell you what, something that very, very much surprised me is a lot of them answered with like an R34 GDR V spec,
Really?
which very much surprised me. I was expecting some, as I said, Brock HRT, yada, 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 that I don't understand.
Yeah.
But a lot of them answered, I mean, a lot of them did answer with, like my mate Sean, who's a videographer who works for me on Drag Challenge. He had, I think, the GTR, and then he had some drag car, and then he said a VL Turbo. And so,
I have driven I've actually driven a VL Calais Turbo. A very good friend of mine who's actually going to be my best man at my wedding in a few months. He
cool.
he had a VL Calais and in turquoisey green, and I drove it once, and it was really cool. Really cool. The turbo lag you really felt because it just was so slow in its delay, and then when it actually did kick in, you could actually feel it pushing you back into the bucket seat. It was a really nice car, but yeah,
It's a very nice engine. I mean, it might have been a bit cooler in the Skyline, in my opinion, but that's just me,
I know it was a stop. It was a stopgap really for Holden in the end. But hey, cool engine, cool car at the time. Loved it. Yep. Absolutely loved it. The mind boggles when you think about these things. It's what.
It's the hardest question, honestly.
I know.
As I said, you killed me, and I had so many cars on the list that were just kind of getting bumped around, like like the old. Ford was the RS 200, that crazy little rally car.
I love that Escort. So
I know
cool.
that was so close to being on the list, and I'm like, no, but what about the GTO? And same with the Japanese cars. I love an NSX in manual, but how could I say no to an LFA? Yes, it was a very difficult question.
It was a very difficult question, but I love it. The Ferrari F40, the Lexus LFA, and the Audi Quattro GTO. I don't think that's anyone can top that to date. That's a really nice garage, we'll see. I'm utterly impressed already. That's a really cool choice, and I think the mystery benefactor would be very happy with what you've chosen. So I love it.
So. Well, look, I'm waiting for the money in the account. Hopefully, I wake up tomorrow morning and we can go do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you about the Nug and everything. And I know you're in the process of doing some work on the Nug. Once you've settled in, you've just bought a new house for you and your family, and you're going to be sussing out how to get everything sorted in the new workshop. So it's really cool. And there is a video that's now out in regards to the new Nug headquarters. So you're going to have a lot of fun time ahead, and obviously going to do some ongoing work to get the car prepared. 100%. Yeah, and Bathurst, would you do it again?
Bit of a loaded question. We did get a lot of laps under yellow.
Yeah,
and although it was very fun to do, it was a very expensive exercise for what I think we had 5 green racing laps in the end. I think there's just too many cars in the field. 63 cars.
Yep.
They were on TV, everybody was fighting for positions, and there's a few people too keen, and it only takes 2 people to come together, and then it's ruined for everyone. And, everyone tried to do the right thing, but there was just a few people that just couldn't calm down. And it just meant we had too many laps under yellow, and I think if I was to do Bathurst again, I'd probably go and do the Bathurst Challenge, which is the regularity event.
Yep.
It's not a race as per se, but from what I hear, I had a mate do it in an Excel, and he said he literally drove the car for 2 hours on that track with no yellow flags. I mean, you can imagine just doing like 2 hours worth of laps in a car you've built. And yeah, I mean, I know I can knock time off my laps. I just didn't get the chance to do it. And I'd love to come back with a proper time, So I think if I would go back, it would be for Bathurst Challenge.
I hope you do it. I really hope you do it. And I wish you all the best with the Nug, because that's a great little thing. Go and check it out on YouTube, the Nugget Project. It is a cool channel. Matthew, you've been great. All the best,
you,
and I hope we get to chat again soon. It'd be good. Actually, hopefully we get to meet in person soon, because I would like to have a decent chat with you and get to know a little bit more about the Nuggets. It's a really cool project, and you ought to be congratulated.
100%, mate. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. And well done I'm really enjoying this the series. This is really cool, and look, hopefully we can bump into each other up at Eastern Creek, and hopefully let's not tease too much, but I have my eye on a future Nugget project, which will be the next evolution of Nugget project.
I already know about this. But I'm not going to say a word. I'm not going to say a word.
I'm just going to convince the guy to sell me the damn car. But he's a hard customer. So if he can do that, we'll do this. Otherwise, who knows? I've got some other adventures I'd love to do in the Nug, so we'll see where we go.
Fantastic. Thanks for having a chat.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.
You could tell during our chat how proud Matt was of building and racing the Excel. Some would have said he bit off more than he could chew. But the fact is, he built the race car off his own back, and it's proof that it can be done. And not one to rest on his own laurels, Matt has taken on another project. A project that I secretly knew about for many months until it was announced late last year. Through word of mouth, Matt discovered a 1984 Toyota MR2 that sat abandoned in a paddock for more than 2 decades. Through some wheeling and dealing, he was able to acquire the car, and it now sits in his garage, fully stripped and ready to be rebuilt as his road-going pride and joy, affectionately known as the Nugget Project 2.0. You can follow his exploits with the MR2, as well as the racing efforts of the original Nug, via the Nugget Project on YouTube, as well as on Facebook and Instagram. We've put the links up to the respective channels in the show notes, as well as the Motor Dream podcast website at themotordream.com.au. And that's where you can go for previous episodes, show notes and information on the show, as well as links to our socials with the handle The Motor Dream, which is also the hashtag. As always, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and now YouTube Music. And if you enjoy the podcast, please leave some feedback and spread the word to anyone you know who loves cars. Thank you as always for listening to the Motor Dream podcast. I'm Conor McNally, and remember, if you do enjoy your driving, please do so safely out on the roads. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Motor Dream podcast. This series is proudly produced by Beast Productions.